Recording in progress.
Keep an eye on everything there. Okay, folks, I want to welcome you all to the 25 or so people. I'll ask somebody on the back table to get a good head count to myself and Jana for the article. The September 2024 meeting of the World's Fair Society. I think you all know I'm Mike Truax, although there may be a couple strangers out there. I'll get to them in a minute. This year's the 120th anniversary of the World's Fair, as we know, and the 38th anniversary of the Society. Today is a new special type of meeting. We're having 4 authors who recently wrote novels about the fair present their books, and they will be available to sell and sign their books afterwards. I've already sold one for a speaker who's going to be talking about his book via Zoom. Everyone here has received also, when you came in, a reproduction of a 1904 World's Fair postcard. And if you didn't get one, go back and sign up for an attendance prize and also a postcard from the Demonell Mansion. How many people here have been to the Demonell Mansion and seen a great collection of World's Fair memorabilia down there? If you haven't been there, you ought to go. It's down right next to the Lemp Mansion, where you can get a really nice choice meal too. We have several attendance prizes to present tonight. There's 3 books about the World's Fair and also some postcards from the Society's 20th anniversary in 2006, featuring the St. Louis Weatherbird standing in front of Festival Hall. First, some administrative and meeting reminders. Please be sure and silence your cell phones. For people that are here, pictures are allowed, but no flash photos. That goes back 10 or 15 years or so when people had flash cameras. Phones are usually smart enough not to flash if they don't need to. And next, an important announcement. Our annual elections are coming up. And in November, and I'd like to tell you about 2 positions that we will need to replace on the Society Executive Board for next year. The 2 positions are the treasurer. Art Daviar has submitted his resignation, and these positions are essential for the Society to continue to provide and manage a quality organization enjoyed by our 300 members, because probably just about everybody in here gets a copy of our bulletin once a month. You get reminders about the meetings and some bonuses and attendance prizes by coming to meetings. If you think you could help the Society in either of these positions, please contact any board member to inquire for more information. I mentioned that Society member Art Daviar is resigning. He has primary charge and custody of all Society funds. He receives the money that we get from various sources. He makes payments when required and approved, and he maintains and updates the records of the Society finances. And finally, he makes periodic reports to the executive board and membership. Experience in Excel is highly recommended. Transition training will be provided. Another board member who has submitted a resignation is our Director of Exploitation, Holly Childress. And Holly, I put this together yesterday, not having seen a summary, but if I missed anything, please jump up and let me know. They manage the Society Instagram account for PR purposes, coordinates with the Facebook administrators, and sends out blasts via MailChimp to the entire Society membership, maintaining a list of active members and emails. These include meeting reminders, special announcements, and various other duties as a volunteer active board member. Did I forget anything, Holly? Okay, that's right. She is also an administrator on our Facebook page, and yes. She has a page that catches the images that she posts from Instagram, and also has sent out probably about annually a survey with a lot of questions the board wants to know about. Experience with social media like Facebook and Instagram is desired for that. So hopefully there's some people in here who can consider helping the Society out, because we are doing a whole lot of things for the 300 members and the 30 plus members that are here tonight. For Zoom attendees, we'll be watching the chat room, or I'll be watching the chat room, hopefully, to see if there's any questions that come up and try to answer those either at the end of each presenter or at the end of all the presenters. And if you haven't heard already, we have a Facebook group page. There's 7,400 members on that. And there's constant postings about World's Fair events and memorabilia, news about the fair and society. Our Instagram has 1,100 followers. Is that about right, Holly? About 1,100 people following our Instagram. Okay. Finally, I hope everyone here has signed up for the attendance prizes. Be sure and stay for the drawing. And let me make sure it is recording. No, not that. Don't want to end the meeting. It is recording. Good. Next, I'd like to set the stage by looking back to Friday, December 1st. December, where'd that come from? Been working on the banquet. September 13th, 1904, 120 years ago today. The Olympic golf competition got underway at Glen Echo Country Club, and that's where we had our July meeting. A special team competition was won by the Trans-Mississippi Golf Association. St. Louis and Stuart Stickney defeated American champion H. Chandler Egan in the opening round, but Egan came back to win the second round. Over 10,000 residents of St. Clair County in Illinois came across Eads Bridge to attend Belleville Day. Nearly all businesses, schools, and even banks were closed in Belleville. Over half the population went to the fair. No daily newspaper was published for the first time in decades. Mayor Fred Kern joined Fair President David Francis for ceremonies at the Illinois Building. And finally, for the people that like to come to the fair and see the unusual, the spear exhibition dance at the Philippine exhibits Bagabo Village became a little too realistic. Modesto and Ramon put on an exhibition dance of opponents. Modesto had one of the best tribal records for the number of men killed. During the dance, Modesto shattered Ramon's shield. The village manager quickly stepped in with a bolo to stop the fight, separating the two opponents from going any further. So I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Sarah Angleton. Sarah has written the book Paradise on the Pike, and we'll learn a lot about one of the major Pike concessions. Sarah lives in Wentzville, northwest of St. Louis, and she has 2 degrees in zoology and literature. She's a storyteller, historian, and the author of 4 historical novels and a nonfiction history humor essay collection. So with that, I'd like to invite her up to the microphone, and I'll bring up her presentation. Screen share. Shares. That would be you. Like this. And I can go full screen. Now I can go full screen.
Just click
No
progress. Yeah. Oh. Oh,
I can hide those 2.
okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for inviting me to speak. In some ways, it's a little absurd that I'm here speaking to you because I am a society member. For those of you who have never met me, these are, a collection of my books. And of course, I'm here because I wrote one set in the World's Fair. And as I was doing that, just as I was finishing the first draft, really, I started to look and see, well, who are the experts in St. Louis? Who do I need to talk to make sure that I'm doing this well? because this is the first time that I've ever set a book in a city that I love. And I wanted to do it right. And so I discovered you just as the old exhibit at the museum was closing. I showed up that weekend and I joined the society, and I've been coming to most of the meetings since, and have learned a ton from all of you. So I thank you so much for your patience with me and helping me do this, I hope, right. So as Mike mentioned, I have a degree in zoology, which is not typical probably for somebody who spends their time writing novels. But my mother gave me some wise advice when I was looking for a new topic, and she said, you should probably use that degree for something. Just, yeah. So I started to look at the history of zoos. And this is what I found. It's a really ugly history. You know, and I mean, we probably all know that this is animal handling and animal rights were just not really a thing that was considered. But fortunately, zoos today have come a long way, right? Today, they're working hard to tell a different story. They're safeguarding genetic diversity. They are teaching the public about how animals actually live in nature. They're doing their best to stimulate their animals and keep them in healthy locations. And thankfully, modern zoos, the good ones. Oh no, what did I do? Got it. Okay. There we go. That's the one I wanted. Fortunately, they don't have those cages anymore. And the reason is because of this man. And you, okay. Okay. The reason is because of this man, Carl Hagenbeck, who everyone in this room has probably heard of. I don't know if you know a whole lot about him. He's a German animal trainer. At the end of the 19th, early 20th century, he was kind of the big name in the animal trade throughout the world. He bragged in his memoir that once P.T. Barnum had gotten a hold of one of his elephants, he would never buy from anyone else. This was the man to know. He had connections all over the world. He started actually when he was 15, because his father, also a Carl Hagenbeck, was a fishmonger, and he had contracted with local fishermen who managed to catch in their net one time some seals. And he liked animals, and he thought, well, I have to buy these seals, so I might as well show them on the side and see if I can get people to come and see them in Hamburg and make a little bit of a profit. So this was a side business for him. But his son fell head over heels in love with the industry. And so throughout his career, he did a lot of really good things. He demonstrated pretty well that animals in various climates could actually acclimatize to other environments and not necessarily have to, see if I do that right, have to be in enclosed spaces to be healthy. And in fact, fresh air was beneficial. He worked with like-minded animal trainers to really promote very kind-hearted training practices that dealt not so much with punishment, but with the rapport that it could build up between an animal and its trainer. And he pioneered the tableau, which was kind of the open air exhibit. But not only that, what he did was he put animals from the same part of the world together in a way that people could view them without much separation, or at least not visual separation, because there were trenches. And then also he could have predators and prey from the same parts of the world together because they were separated by trenches and landscaping as well. And so our modern zoos look a lot like that. The other thing that he did, of course, is in the 1870s, he was also a real advocate of teaching people about the world. And his big idea for doing that was to bring in people from parts of the world. So he brought in indigenous peoples. First, he brought in Sami from what's northern Norway now to travel with reindeer. And then he also, when this was well received, because he toured it across Europe, he also brought in Sinhalese from British Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka. And of course, this is kind of a familiar thing to us studying the World's Fair too, because this was a big part of the World's Fair. Oops. I'm sorry, what? It might have gone to.
Scroll up.
No, I think that's right. Okay. So Hagenbeck's Paradise on the Pike. This is where my novel is primarily set. You can see, you've probably seen these pictures before, but you can see over here with, you've got the barker outside and you've got an elephant, and the elephant is handled by a gentleman from British Ceylon. There were several that traveled with Hagenbeck to come to the fair, to be a part of his grand plan. So at the time that the fair was going to happen, Hagenbeck had two big projects on his mind. One was that he wanted to build a beautiful new kind of zoo that nobody, like, unlike anything that anybody had ever seen in Hamburg. You can see here kind of the tiers and the way that he put together the exhibits. And actually, if you travel to Hamburg today, you can still go to Tierpark Hagenbeck. It's still family owned by the Hagenbeck family. And it's a pretty big deal. The other thing that he wanted to do, though, was he wanted to try out these same techniques at the greatest fair that there'd ever been. So he had been at Chicago. He wasn't originally the Hagenbeck who was supposed to be here. It was his brother, or there, it was his brother-in-law. And a last minute illness brought him to the fair. But the exhibit there was not the same. It was not this kind of a structure, because you can see kind of how he's put the tiers in here too. So you've got animals up here that would eat the animals down here if they could get to them. and no fences, or at least no substantial fences. Maybe you've seen these images too. There was a baby elephant that was born on the boat ride over from Hamburg. They were hoping that it was going to be born at the fair. It was not, it didn't make it. But, and then of course, our Sinhalese mahouts, and he also brought a snake charmer. We know that. I added, for the purpose of my story, I added one more person to his crew, but I will talk about that in a minute. So some of the features of Hagenbeck's, you probably know, it had a giant arena in it where animals performed all kinds of interesting, spectacular feats. And then, of course, we all know about the elephant slide, the chutes for the elephant. In my novel, there is a scene, there are a couple of scenes with the elephants that are actually taken out of the trainer's memoirs. The first one is when one of the trainers took the elephants for the first time up the slide to send them down, which is a somewhat natural behavior for them, because they'll do it on riverbanks in the wild. But he went up, and the last one that went down the slide took him with him, and he slid into the water. And he lived to tell the tale. Actually, the animals were very kind. These gigantic animals didn't stomp on him, didn't drown him. They actually helped him out of the water. And he lived to tell the tale, which I do think is a good indicator that they loved their trainers. They had a good relationship there. The other scene that shows up in my novel is a scene where one of the trainers brings one of the elephants to the bar after the fair is closed, where the Hagenbeck's crew like to gather, and had her like crouched down on the floor, and they put a tablecloth over the top of her, and they ate sandwiches and drank beer off her back, and of course shared. And so that allegedly really happened. That's in their remembrances. Let's see. I'm gonna
take care of a couple housekeeping chores here.
Oh, sorry. That works. Okay, so I borrowed some real things, but it's also fiction. And so I did make up some things that I hope fit with the fair and the era. I took a little bit of license in, I mentioned the Sinhalese crew of mahouts, which are wild animal trainers in Sri Lanka, and the snake charmer. I also added to their number a young lady who danced with the animals. And the reason that I did that was, first of all, she fit in my story. She became the love interest of my protagonist. So that worked well. But also, you know, it is what it is. But also, if you have read Mike's magazine, The Greatest World's Fair Ever, then you've probably seen the excerpt from, it's the Cosmopolitan magazine that describes a female dancer who dances, and, you know, her delicate foot almost graces the teeth of the lion. And there is no indication in any reports that I've found that she was a Sinhalese dancer, but in my novel, she is. So my protagonist, Max, who falls in love with this dancer, is a young German immigrant. He is fictional. He has lived his entire life up to this point in a little potato farm in the middle of nowhere north of Hamburg. He's lost his father to kind of mysterious circumstances, and he receives an unusual offer from a crazy animal man who wants to build a zoo and buy his land. And so he and his mother take that opportunity. They come to St. Louis, where they have some extended family, and Max finds himself overwhelmed by being in this new city. He has, you know, this feeling of freedom and experiencing the wider world, but also sort of feeling isolated and a little trapped in a place where he doesn't speak the language, where everything is a little, he's just not quite sure how he fits. But he does get a job on the grounds of the World's Fair that's upcoming, and everybody's excited about it in the city. At first he's in building, and then he discovers that Hagenbeck, lo and behold, has followed him from Hamburg and is here on the Pike. Now, Carl Hagenbeck himself was here at the very beginning of the fair. He helped to set up the concession. Then he left because he had a zoo to build. So his son Lorenz was pretty much in charge of it. Let's see. So Max gets to Hagenbeck's, and here is where he discovers a little bit more than he bargained for. He discovers that the woman he loves, that she appears to be free, but in some ways she's as much on display as the animals. He discovers in the reptile enclosure that there has been a grisly murder. The murder victim is one of the American business partners of the Hagenbeck firm, and he is very, very loosely based on an American partner that the Hagenbecks did not like very much. And in fact, actually, Lorenz Hagenbeck posited in his memoir that this man, Lee Williams, had a part in planning the Pike fire at the end of the fair. I have no idea whether that's true or not. I just know that Lorenz Hagenbeck thought it was. Don't worry, I killed him off long before he could do that. So, and then Max, of course, also comes face to face with the ugly role that bigotry may have played in maintaining a facade in this dreamlike world that he finds himself in, this beautiful landscape of the fair that's actually made of temporary buildings and isn't going to last. And yes, when he finally does solve the murder, he uses the newfangled forensic science of fingerprinting, introduced to the US at the 1904 World's Fair by Scotland Yard. So, I did have one more slide that I didn't quite get to. This is Reuben Casting. He's one of the trainers. And he had a penchant for goats. And they feature in the novel as well. Are there questions? Oh, the book is $15. Yeah. I have not. It's on my bucket list. So
Repeat the question.
Oh, she asked if I have been to the zoo in Hamburg. So I have not. And actually, originally, I thought that this novel was going to be set at that zoo. There were a couple of reasons I couldn't end up ultimately doing that. One was because I don't speak a lot of German. And a lot of the sources that I was finding were going to be in German. Also, I wasn't too sure that I was the right person to handle the geopolitical hot mess that Germany was at the time. that this novel takes place. And then also I discovered that Hagenbeck came and did the same things with some of the same people that he wanted to do here in St. Louis in my backyard. And oh my goodness, I could set my book at the World's Fair, and who wouldn't want to do that? Yes. So Hagenbeck did not help design the St. Louis Zoo. Although Lorenz Hagenbeck, I did find one source that said that he consulted with St. Louis when they were building their zoo. But really his influence is what kind of made all modern zoos look the way they look right now, because his was so successful. People really enjoyed seeing animals a little freer.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. We need to stop the screen share. Okay. Next is going to be Doug Stewart. And Doug, if you would unmute yourself, I'm going to make you a co-host. And I'm first going to call up. I can close Sarah's. And I apologize. Usually I've got some help here. I don't see anybody in the waiting room. And if I have to interrupt people to let you into the waiting room. There's Doug Stewart, and there's the cover of his book. And I'm going to come here. And Doug, if you start talking, you should get the large screen here then for everybody else to hear what you. Doug is going to present via Zoom. I'll take payment for his signed books. He lives in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where he is an emeritus professor of international relations at Dickinson University. He has written 6 books and many published articles during his career in several branches of federal government. So Doug, if you go ahead and begin talking, I think we'll all get to see you on the larger screen.
Am I no longer muted?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Well, let me begin by thanking Mike and his colleagues for inviting me to this event. And I only regret that I'm not there in person to interact with everyone. And let me also just commend Sarah on an interesting presentation relating to what is clearly a very interesting book. So I look forward to reading that. I guess I would begin by explaining, saying a little about the main character. I have been a Sherlock Holmes fan since high school, and I think it's probably since high school that I've had in mind the idea of writing.
Can you kind of hear it a little bit? No.
I'm sorry, is there a problem,
Doug,
Mike?
I've got the microphone up against my computer trying to enable you to be heard. I've done some things like this previously and had varying successes, but I'm not sure how to proceed at this point. If I turn it around.
Well, no problem with the hearing.
What, Riva?
Shall I keep
No
speaking?
problem hearing. No problem hearing. We
Yeah,
can hear very
everything's
well
fine.
on Zoom.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sally Carter could hear it. It's the people in the room here that can't hear because my computer is the only microphone. So I'm trying to solve that problem, folks.
Okay, sorry about
keep-
that.
Well, I'll continue on and hope that it's going to be audible for most folks. I was about to say that I've long been a fan of Sherlock Holmes. I've also taught a mini course recently on why we love Sherlock. But so I've had in mind the idea of writing a book myself, but then I didn't really have any specific ideas about either the plot or the context of the story. until I came to St. Louis. I was in St. Louis about 2 decades ago for a conference, and I came a day early and used that day to visit the Historical Society Museum and did some research on the 1904 fair, and came away with 6 different aspects of the fair that I wanted to integrate into my story, and have done so now. The first of those is the most important, the one that matters most to me, the one that is really central to the whole story, has to do with the 1,200 Filipinos who were brought to the fair and placed in a compound as essentially an exhibit to precipitate, to trigger American public interest in the Philippines specifically, and Asia Pacific in general. This was part of the Roosevelt administration's campaign, sometimes called the Open Door Campaign. Very often, the idea of the open door strategy is simply described as an economic campaign to make sure that the United States gets a piece of the markets in Asia. But actually, it was more comprehensive than that. It was not only an economic strategy, it was also a political strategy and a military strategy. And for some odd reason, Roosevelt and his advisors thought that if the American public coming to the fair could see 1,200 Filipinos in their native habitat, it would increase their interest in playing some active role in Asia in general and in the Pacific in particular. So this becomes a central element in my story. The other things that are in the book that came out of my visit to the St. Louis Museum, first off, was the Pyrheliophorus machine, which won the prize for the best invention during the World's Fair. And it was a device composed of thousands of mirrors that focused the sun's rays and was capable of basically melting metal. It could generate a beam of heat up to 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And I just thought that was a fascinating invention for that time. The third thing that I came away with, knowing that I wanted to put in the book, was the giant Ferris wheel. And indeed, I have Holmes leaping off one of the cars in the Ferris wheel at one point.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. How did you do
something. It's easier to hear me now. Okay.
Library person up. So maybe go back a minute or so and kind of catch us up.
Okay. Basically, I'm
After-
talking about the six different things that I found out about the fair when I was visiting St. Louis, and I succeeded in integrating all of them into my book. And they are, first off, about the Filipino compound, which is really central to my book. And then also just some things that I was interested in, such as the Pyrheliophorus machine, which used mirrors to generate intense heat that could literally melt metal. Then I said that I was also interested in the giant Ferris wheel, and that plays an important part in close to the end of the book. And I also was interested in the fact that they sponsored the fair sponsored an aeronautics competition, which was supposed to offer a $100,000 reward for anyone who could fulfill the flight guidelines of the competition. No one as I understand it, no one ever collected the money. And then something that Sarah told us about, I couldn't resist writing in the elephant sliding down into the pond, into the pool every day. In my story, I have one of the bad guys running away from Holmes, and he runs into the pool and, of course, gets killed by the elephant. And I have the local newspaper just with a headline describing this event as a pachydermination. And finally, the sixth thing that I wanted that I came across that I wanted to make sure was in the book was actually a person. There's a person named Walter H. Loving. I found out about Loving from my research, and the more I found out about him, the more fascinated I became. He was an African-American, classically trained musician, studied at the New England Conservatory and in Vienna as well. And then he became an American Army officer. And after that became the head of the Philippine Constabulary Band, which meant that he was in charge of a large portion of the Filipinos who were brought to the compound in St. Louis. And he had a very interesting life as a music composer, but also as a representative of the United States in the Philippines, where he was really sort of a national figure. And so I just wanted to make sure that all six of these elements of the book, of the World's Fair, are identified and play some role in the book. And I was happy that was the result. So I think I'll keep it brief. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Yes, Larry.
Were you concerned that all of the Sherlock Holmes people might not like your book or find fault with how you portray Holmes, or you might violate the knowledge about?
Were you concerned with how the Sherlock Holmes fans would enjoy your book, or what they would find enjoyable or not about it?
Well, I really tried to the extent that I was able to make this a pastiche. That is a work of fiction that is modeled on the writing style of some noted author, in this case, of course, Conan Doyle. But I also was all aware that Conan Doyle's descendants and relatives and a lot of other people, particularly in Britain, are intensely protective of Conan Doyle's works, and by consequence, by implication, of Sherlock Holmes. So yeah, I've been treading lightly. I've been wondering if I was going to be attacked by anyone from reading the book. So far, that has not happened. I have gotten a fair number of comments on the pastiche aspect, that my writing style is reasonably good, a reasonably good replication of Conan Doyle's. I would say that in my second book, which is coming out very soon, has Conan Doyle as one of the characters in the book. And in that case, he shows up at Sherlock Holmes' office, a home, and asks for Sherlock Holmes' help to find a kidnapped friend. And so my guess is, if I'm going to get in trouble with the Conan Doyle relatives or supporters, it's going to be the second book that gets me more trouble.
My question has to do with the paraheliophore, which is in fact my paraheliophore, because I love that thing so much. How did you come to feel when you learned that such a fascinating device Father Himalaya couldn't figure out how to make any money with it, and he walked away from it?
The question was, for those out on Zoom who may not have heard, referenced the pyroheliophore, the first world's solar furnace what
Mhm.
happened after the fair to it, and Father Himalaya apparently abandoned it and went back to Portugal.
I have definitely want to defer to Mike on this. I don't have the knowledge about what happened afterwards. I was amazed, frankly, that what seemed to me to be a very impressive invention didn't seem to catch on. I remember there was some comments. Well, I have Father Himalaya, the individual who invented the machine, saying that he really is not sure what purpose the machine will have in the future, whether people will find a role for it. So that's as close as I came to trying to make sense out of the story. Mike, I defer to your historical knowledge on that.
I included that in some of the inventions and first at the fair presentation and found what you basically referenced. There could heat up to 6,800 degrees, and it followed the sun and could focus a real hot thing and just about melt almost any metal. Beyond that, he was called Father Himalaya because he was about 6'4" or 5", much taller than the average person back then. He was as tall as the Himalayas. Okay, well, Doug, I appreciate you staying up on Eastern time zone, and I apologize for the sound issue to begin with, that we were trying to listen to you through the computer speakers, which I was unanticipated. I should have brought an external speaker, because with an external speaker, it probably would have, computer would have projected that out okay.
Well, you can also always share my email with your colleagues here if they have any questions for me.
Okay, I think it might be coming back. We lost our image here in the room. Okay. I am now going to go into screen sharing and ask Steve Wiegenstein to come up. He has written a book called Land of Joys and he's from Columbia. He was raised in the Ozarks and went to Mizzou. He has taught in several colleges and now lives in Columbia. He made the drive here today just to tell us about his new Daybreak book and a fictional Pike concession called Hillbilly Holler. So let me call up his presentation. This would be it. And move this up to go full screen. Move that up to full screen and hide the floating video and hide the meeting controls. How about that?
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for having me. My book, A Land of Joys, is set about half at the World's Fair and half at a tiny little village in the Ozarks. It's called Daybreak. And to kind of give you a sense of what this book is about and how it works, I want to show you it is part of a longer series. Let's see if I can advance the slide. Mouse button. Okay. There it goes. It is the fourth book of what is going to be a 5-book series. Starting with Slant of Light and going right now through Land of Joys, while I'm working on revisions for the 5th book. Each of the books stands by itself, so you can read them in any order you want, or read one and not the others. But it's the story of a little village in the Ozarks that begins as a commune. And there were a lot of utopian communities in the first half of the 19th century in the Midwest. It's been an interest of mine for a long, long time. So the kind of the arc of the whole series is the development, the troubles, the evolution of this, what begins as an agricultural commune in the 1850s. What brought me to the World's Fair was that as the books moved forward, I was reaching the turn of the century. And I'm always looking for things that kind of exemplify where America is at this point in history. And for me, the World's Fair really kind of captures the whole complexity of the American spirit in one location. And since my folks were from the Ozarks, it would have been a perfectly natural thing for them to get involved with the World's Fair. And in fact, one of the villagers writes an enormously successful novel, kind of like Shepherd of the Hills, if you are familiar with Shepherd of the Hills, and decides he's going to take out, create a concession on the Pike to try to promote his best-selling book and have hillbilly activities going on, music and things like that as a part of the entertainment and promotion. What is it about the World's Fair, though, that captured my imagination and makes, to me anyway, makes it such a perfect location when you're thinking about America at the turn of the century? A couple of things. One is, while there's the utopian impulse of the 19th century had begun to die out at this point after the war, what it was being replaced with, in my thinking, is a belief in a kind of technological utopia, in that instead of the back to the land, we're all going to share common goods and sort of heal the world through a communal experience in an agricultural way. Now it's technology is going to usher in this new great era and move the human race forward in unimaginable ways and make us all, happier and more whole and more perfect and that sort of thing. And you can certainly see that at the World's Fair with these, great emphasis on spectacular gadgetry that's being invented. People would come to marvel at these things. And the idea was like, the future is limitless. We're gonna transform the world with our technology. And so that was one of the things that attracted me to the World's Fair, is this sort of movement of thought. And the other thing is that the St. Louis World's Fair was probably the first place for the United States to show its muscle as a rising empire, right? And that the United States had just completed its first set of imperial conquests. We now had colonies, we had territories, just like the old empires did. And so there's this feeling that America was on the rise. It's going to push the old nations aside. It's going to sort of take center stage in the world. The Philippine exhibition, of course, was sort of the classic example of that, where part of the fun of going to the fair was to walk among these conquered people and look at them and sort of congratulate yourself on how superior you were to these primitives. And so, it reveals both the tremendous optimism and the rising power of America, and also, to some extent, the ugly side of it, and that there was undeniable racism that was being put on display. The sense of the superiority of the white race over all the races of the world is very much in evidence there. The infant science of anthropology, which was just having its birth at the World's Fair, and at this point, the early anthropologists had not yet figured out that they needed to shuck their cultural biases and think of peoples of the world in different ways other than in this kind of hierarchical setting of who's primitive and who's advanced. Of course, one one of the things that kind of interests me in this whole story is that all the things that were going on at the fair still echo through history, right? And as a writer of historical novels, that's the thing that I'm always after is like, well, how does that period reflect upon us? And so just this week, when all of a sudden eating dogs came back in the news, I was like, oh, I know that old story. They did. We had rumors about people sneaking out and stealing pets, in 1904, and so it just kind of goes to show you that everything old is new again in some respects. Just to kind of give you a sort of sense, here's a map that I commissioned of my fictional community. All of these are real towns, okay, except for the one in the middle, which is Daybreak, which is my imaginary community. And if you're familiar with this location, Fredericktown there to the east, Ironton and Arcadia to the west, you can kind of get an idea. Daybreak is sitting on the St. Francis River, about halfway between Fredericktown and Arcadia. I did make up another little town called Lucinda, which is a rail town where there's a sawmill, but all the others are real. And that's kind of what happens in my book, in that I tried to get the geography of the fair down right. I tried, one of the things I did when I was researching for this book very early on was join the Facebook group and start watching the Facebook group and all the discussions and figuring out, studying the many images and maps and things to give myself that kind of immersive feeling in what was going on, because I also, of course, was reading a lot at the time, but you can't quite draw things out from reading the way that you can from images and maps and things like that. That to me is always a very helpful thing to do. So I hope I got the sort of geographical element and the cultural element of the fair right, but I populated it with fictional people. Right? So in my novel, there's one or two passing real people who come through now and then and sort of make an appearance. But all the characters are of my own invention. But to me, the fair in 1904 was just an absolute microcosm of America, both the good and the bad. All elements of America sort of distilled into this one location. And so as a writer, it was an absolutely perfect setting in which to sort of explore themes of American history and culture and where we were at the time as a nation. So I'll open for questions or anything like that. Yeah. Yes.
Totally separate.
Okay, the question was, do characters recur from the start to the finish? And they do. In fact, I don't know whether I can go back. No, well, that's all right. In the first book, is there any way to go in reverse? There you go. Okay. Okay. In the first book, the central character is a young woman who is 25 years old. She's just arrived in the commune. She's one of the founders of the commune. She's newly married. And by the time we get to the Land of Joys, she's 70. And so characters rise and fall. They go through the Civil War. They go through all kinds of things. Some die out, new people come on, but there's kind of for me, part of the fun of writing it was working with these same people as they matured and changed and lost and betrayed each other and that sort of thing. So yeah, But I do want to emphasize that the books, people read them independently. So. Other questions?
I have a question. You talked about them being kind of a concession on the Pike called Hillbilly Holler.
Mhm.
How was that received and what kind of exhibit was it?
Okay. Well, it was, there was the Ozarks shooting gallery on the Pike. So I thought, well, it's close enough to not seem out of place. It was intended as a promotion for the novel. And so one of the attractions was that the author would be there and he would greet people and he would take photographs. He would sign postcards, kind of like Geronimo did, where he had a never-ending supply of cards and apparel and that sort of thing. And then they would also put on quasi folkloric things of musical performances and recitations. And that to me is also an interesting part of this period of history. Is it when we began to commodify the Ozarks as a culture and to sort of package it and sell it to people, and because Branson was developing about that same period of time, slightly afterward, where it becomes in your economic interest to hillbilly things up, and black out your teeth and do that sort of thing. So you begin to sort of sell the image of yourself. Speaking of selling the image, I do have all the novels for sale if you're interested. Land of Joys is normally $18, but for one night only, I'm knocking it to $15 as the World Fair Society discount. So I'll be peddling afterwards, just like the protagonist in my book.
Okay, next up is Jana Meehan to tell us about her book, Where the Lights Are Shining. And Jana has been a writer, publisher, and editor for her career. This is her fourth novel. She lives in St. Louis and has loved the World's Fair for many, many years. She's currently the editor of the Society's monthly newsletter, the World's Fair Bulletin. And we'll see if I can do a screen share and get her file up. Jana, if you're going to talk here, or I can give you the microphone, you can talk from a chair or, okay. Speakers, share. And then I gotta go. The screen. Screen again.
There you go.
Now,
How y'all doing?
okay, just click the button or you can use the arrow keys.
Well, I'm Jana Meehan. And this is my book. And it's set at the World's Fair also. But y'all don't need to know much about the World's Fair because you don't have on that shit. But I want to talk a little bit about the book and how I got it. Now, about 7 years ago, Larry Gross and I went out to lunch in the top of the road because we were very tired from being the editor of this publication. And I said, I can do that. And it seemed to have worked out. But when I come into it, I'm thinking, well, I just finished my third novel. And I don't need to start another. I'm pretty busy right now because I'm doing this World Fair thing, but I need to get at it. But while I'm getting at it, I realize that I know that the World's Fair had a 4 o'clock, and I knew that there was a Ferris wheel and this city day. That's okay. So I had to dive in and immerse myself in the world, every detail, every website, every book, every magazine, everything that I could, so that I would not embarrass myself too badly in front of you. So that was my goal, and I began. But I also
Zoom people
noticed,
can't hear.
You can't hear?
No, Zoom people can't hear.
Okay, then I will go to the
Oh.
microphone. So when I got to get ready to do this, it struck me that I still need to start a new book. But all the experts tell you that when you write a book, write about what you know. And it was coming along more and more every day that what I know is becoming the world's fair. So I wrote this story. It is not a mystery, it's an adventure. It is a love story. And a young man and woman meet on the fairgrounds, and the attraction is instant. And they only have a certain number of days to get to know each other, and so they hurry. And one thing leads to another. And Rosemary is her name, and she goes to the fair and she meets a pterodactyl. That pterodactyl was real, but it wasn't really at the fair. Yes, sir.
I'm gonna have to ask you to come back here because the camera has a microphone in it for the Zoom people,
Oh, okay, so
and they
that's,
can't hear you.
okay.
I thought that would help.
I'm fascinated by that pterodactyl. And, yeah, I'm directed. Okay,
And
how are you, Zoom?
Maybe
How are
back
you,
up
Zoom?
about a minute or two. I won't say start over, but as you became editor, you had to learn a lot about the fair.
I had to learn a lot about the fair as your new editor. And so I plunged myself in. And an amazing thing happened during that part of the journey. I met these guys, these three men that were a bottomless source of information and learning and kindness. Max Storm, Mike Truax, and Larry Gross. Now, Mike Truax is a particular case. I met this guy, the first night I met him, we went out to dinner and with Larry, and I said to myself, I have nothing in common with this man. What will I ever talk to him about? He's a military guy, a veteran. I want no part of that. He has no interests that I share. There is nothing that we can ever, ladies and gentlemen, this guy, I have everything in common with him. And in the case of Max, just as well, but not for long enough. And Larry, they've become three of my best friends in the world. So if I got nothing out of this little job, I have friendships out of it that I will cherish forever. So Rosemary is the heroine in the book. She meets a pterodactyl, click it. She meets a horse who can quote the Bible. I bet you know who that guy is. She comes across my pirate heliophore, which Doug talked about, and click it. She meets the love of her life. The guy's name is Jim McCluskey. He is based on a real cop. When I think of Jim McCluskey, Jim McCluskey is the real cop. Jim McIntyre is the character. Go ahead and click it. And I think it's a pretty good story. It's a pretty good love story. It's a pretty good adventure. And when you write about something as expansive as the World's Fair, you got to have conflict, and you can't have conflict in a story unless you have a bad guy. I'm going to give you two really bad guys. But go ahead. You get Rosemary and you get those people, and we're backing up a little bit.
Don't touch these wires.
Okay, I didn't think I was. Any questions? You saw briefly, Steve said that he had some real people out of his book, and I think that's a great idea because it gives you a little bit more sense of reality. These people really exist. So I put some cameo appearances in my book also, just to make it a little bit closer to real life. Go ahead. Rosemary is our girl. You can read about some of her attributes. I'm not just going to read the screen. And she is from Kansas City. And her father was one of the architects who helped design the Palace of Varied Industries. And the actual architecture firm, I talk about his participation in that firm. But besides that, he's got a little coin. Mr. Elby makes a good salary, and our bad guy finds that out and finds out this tiny little helpless blonde Mike could be held for ransom. So the plot expands. Go ahead. She brings with her to the fair her twin brother, and he is a know-it-all and kind of a pain. And when he's a know-it-all, he's usually wrong, but he's really a nice guy. And during the summers between periods of school, he's worked as a farmhand. That becomes important lately. Go ahead. Here is a picture of Jim McCluskey. I think of Jim McIntyre when I see that picture. That's how I imagine the hero in the story. And he is, he actually died on October 21st, 1904, after he was told that the guys who robbed a train on the way to St. Louis to the fair out of Chicago were holed up in a tenement at 13th Street and Olive, and they needed to be captured because they had gone onto the train and pistol whipped everybody and stolen all their money, and they were bad guys. So Jim McCluskey called several other detectives to come forth. And in a day before there was tear gas, they burst into the house. Bad guys were waiting for them, and everybody died. Those men are still honored in the police station downtown, I believe, because it was the deadliest police action in St. Louis history. But I took Jim McCluskey out, I turned him into Jim McIntyre, and he is, he's the good guy. He's a very good guy. And I bring together the fact that he calls himself an old Irish cop. So that's my chance to include a little bit of what I know about Irish history. And because of the upbringing he had in Ireland, shortly following the hunger, the Great Hunger. He has an unusual compassion for the poor. He's been one of them, and he has attributes, I hope, that you can fall in love with, the same as Rosemary. Go ahead. Now, I'm going to tell you about my bad guys. I'm going to particularly tell you about the young'un. Go ahead. The young'un is Danny Wallace, and Danny is a pathetic mess. He was a young man in high school, 17 years old, and his parents did not get along. The family is going to be broken, but he's in school one day and a teacher pulls him aside and says, Danny, you know, you've got really good scores in math and science. And Danny has a high-pitched, mellifluous voice that is very calming to people. I think, the teacher said, you should look into a career in medicine. I think you would comfort your patients, and I think you would be a very good doctor. And Danny went home so excited because he's got a career in front of himself now. So he walks into the little tiny itty bitty apartment where he and his parents live, and his mother, who is drunk and passed out, informs him that there's no dad to tell this story to. Your father left me. He can't stand me anymore. He's never coming back. And basically your future is bombed. He really has no choice. He becomes a petty thief and criminal. So when he decides that he should grab Rosemary and hold her for a ransom, he needs a partner because he can't do it himself. And he meets up with Abe Simon. They meet in the Rosebud Cafe, formerly owned by Tom Turpin, the inventor and pioneer of ragtime, and they partner up. It's gonna get ugly. You want to know any more, you know what to do. So click it. So I'm available to sign, and I'm done talking. And are there really any questions? Or not? Good question. There's a, there, oh, the question was, how did I find out about these 4 cops that died trying to capture the bad guys who robbed the train? There is a website put up by a martial artist whose name is Kenny somebody. And he tells the story of the robbery and the 4 cops who burst into the home. Now, I don't know very much about how cops do what they do, but is it not idiocy to burst through the door of a home that you don't have any idea what's going on inside? You don't know if there's guns. You don't know if there's furniture. You don't know what there is to trip over because the place is dark. That's what they did. And you can certainly make a case that it wasn't all that bright, but they didn't have the tools that police officers have today. So that's it. It's a website, and I think that we should talk to this guy who put up this website. He is fascinated with St. Louis history having to do with the police, and I think he could tell us a little bit. One of my other characters, who is a real guy, was a guy named Bill Desmond, who was the chief of police on the fairgrounds during the fair. And this guy, Kenny, whatever his name, I can't remember, he just venerates this Bill Desmond. And Bill Desmond had an unfortunate life. He got deep into his 40s before he found somebody to marry. He married her. She died almost immediately, but first she had a kid, and he had to call his sister in to help him raise the kid because he had to work. And it's a very sad story, but Bill Desmond was a hero. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Well, thank you, Janet. Your book is going to be available for how much on your table?
$20.
Okay. Okay, and sometimes these are special prices. I would like to let all the authors know, of course, the Society is stocking Janet's book at this time, but not the other books. But the Society would like to buy 4 books from each of the other authors, if you still have 4 left at the end after your sales. 1 for the library, 1 for a banquet gift, and 1 for a guy who's ordered 1 of each already before the meeting. And it's about time to ask the, would you get the gifts and stuff too? Members up for the presenters up and draw 1 name. We've got 3 books. We actually only have 4 books, but we're going to draw 3 names from the presenters who are here. And Sarah, you want to come up and draw a name? Sarah drew Marg Oliver, and the books are coming up here to the table. And Janet, you get to draw a name, and you can. Art Davier.
Oh, I'm a winner.
Art Davier, our winner.
All right, Linda, tell me
One
what
of
it
these
is.
books. Mike, one of these books.
You can pick any one of these 4 books. Yes. Yeah. What's that?
I have that one.
You do. And stay up there, taking pictures taken by Jessica. This, Larry Strasburg. People, you're on the street there, aren't you? Huh? You want to come 2 or 3? Probably need to go over to one side or the other for the photographs. And if the presenters would join them, we could get all 6 of you maybe in a picture.
You got that one.
It's not this one. Yeah.
Oh,
It's
it's other ones.
other books. There are other books. No, we want you to go 5 then. Shara said you should have given away one of their books, and I said, you should buy the books. But if you come to the banquet in December 1st, which I'll get to, there will probably be one of those books on the attendance prize table for you to choose if your name is chosen at the banquet.
I'm here.
I'll show you what's going on over on the far side there.
All right, we got our photo. New mugshot in the post office.
Okay, thank you for the attendance prize, and thank you, Linda, for bringing the box of names and books up. I want to give a quick review of our future meetings coming up. We have 2 meetings in October. On Thursday, October 8th at 7 p.m., we'll have a special Zoom-only meeting. Nathan Schrader has spent hundreds of hours modeling the Art Hill and Grand Basin structures of 1904. He'll take us on a virtual tour of the 1904 Grand Basin. You will see the Grand Basin with its light post, statuary, and incredible detail, Art Hill and the Cascades with all the fountains, Festival Hall with its sculptures and windows and columns, and the colonnades with all 14 statues between the two restaurant pavilions. It is truly amazing to see that, and he'll take us on essentially kind of a walking tour with some aerial views now and then of up and down and around the Grand Basin and Art Hill. On Tuesday, October 22nd, at 11 a.m. at the Missouri History Museum, Charter member Charles Kaler will present Hidden in Plain Sight, LGBTQ plus aspects of the 1904 World's Fair. This presentation explores the hidden and untold historical intersection in 1904 between two major exhibits at the History Museum, Gateway to Pride and the 1904 World's Fair. Should be interesting and an opportunity for me and everyone to learn some things about the fair that I didn't know before. On Thursday, November 14th at 6:30 at Booter Library, member Jan Green will present a new updated program of women at the fair. And finally, we'll close our anniversary and Olympic year on Sunday, December 1st, 2024. December 1st occurs on a weekend this year. Unfortunately, it's the Sunday after Thanksgiving, which is what happens when Sunday is December 1st. We're still considering two location options. Cost is a factor we'll consider. It'll probably be at either Probstein Golf Course, where we've met the last 2 years in Forest Park, or at Glen Echo Country Club, where we had a great meal at the July meeting. And I think, a great meal and fellowship is something, we've all had. Is there anybody here who hasn't been to a banquet ever? You ought to come. Talk to anybody who didn't raise their hand. Now we'll close the official meeting, and so that you can go purchase books and ask questions, etc. First, I want to ask if anyone has any other questions or information about the World's Fair, society events, or happenings. Let me see what's going on Zoom. If there's, where's chat? There it is. I'm going to take a minute or so to look through chat. I'm sure there were comments. Somebody needed to leave early. Can't hear the introduction. I can hear, can't hear that, et cetera, et cetera. I think we got some of that worked out. Can Jana begin again? I think she did a pretty good job filling it in. Thanks for fixing the sound. All we see is Jana's book. It's hard to keep up when only one person, and I'm trying to do the screen for the people here and the people in Zoom, and kind of keep that up and not look too dumb. But I think we got through it all, and hopefully everyone had a good chance and opportunity to learn more about the fair, learn about 4 books. Last call for any information. Yes.
How are you going to decide which location for the?
Cost is a factor, and well, let me ask this. Are there any people that feel real strongly about not going to one of those places? Oh, Shara doesn't like Probstein because of the light coming through all the windows, make it hard to get good pictures on her camera. Okay. Get a lens and put it over it, to kind of darken it a little bit. Or use a phone. It's amazing the technology in phone and what they've done to eliminate high contrast and stuff like that. One more last comment, Jana.
Just want to say that on Nathan Schrader, zoom into this if you possibly can, everybody, because I saw a preview and it was utterly stunning, and I call myself pretty hard to study. Also, I want to say that it's September. It's not that far from Christmas Bibles.
The last comment I'll repeat, it's September, Christmas isn't that far off, so buy books. And she also made a comment, she got to see the preview of Nathan Schrader, and she said it was stunning. So with that, for the Zoom people, I want to call Beneva, what have you got, real quick? I'm sorry, the which now?
Seminary.
Oh, Concordia Seminary was great. I may touch base with them. We will get back to Concordia Seminary sometime. They kind of priced themselves out of the market before COVID and was getting higher and higher, et cetera. So we went to buffets and stuff like that. I will give them a call and see what I can find out. Okay, with that, some good comments, and I appreciate everybody's feedback. I try to get back to people as much as I can, as often as I can. We've got 3 board members in back, 1 over here, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Remember, the elections are upcoming. I'm sorry. Did you have a comment? Did you have a comment?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought someone was trying to ask a question. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to end the meeting with Zoom. Thank you all for coming. We had as many, I think, as 15 or 16 people on Zoom, and there 20 at one time?
Yeah.
Okay, great. 30, yeah, we were over 50 people, I counted once. So thank you all on Zoom. Thank you all for coming here. Drive carefully, and thank you all presenters. Great job.